Good morning, everyone. Fantastic turnout today. It's great to be back doing these real seminars. It feels like forever when I've been up on stage, so it's great to be back. Starting closest from my left, we have Alex Folter from Echo Group. We have Michael Chan from BW, Mr. Nelson Wu from Best Incorporated, and Peter Nguyen from Juxi. I hope my pronunciation is not blatantly murdering the name. So, before I start, I just want to notify everyone quickly that Peter has a flight to catch later, so he'll have to take off a bit early. So we're going to come around to some of his questions at the beginning. So, okay. Okay, so we're going to kick off with Alex. Alex, Echo has factories throughout Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, and China. How has the slow resumption to normal in the past year impacted your cross-border supply chain systems?
Well, I think it's fair to say it's been a pretty brutal year. The good news is that Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia have all opened up roughly at the same time. China, as you know, remains closed. However, Southeast Asia is an archipelago with the East Vietnamese Sea in the middle, and we are heavily reliant on air and sea freight. We don't have many roads throughout the area. We don't have a lot of rail throughout the area. So it has been a struggle. People have had to do just in case rather than just in time, but I'm pleased to say that it is slowly recovering. The other challenges, of course, are the very, very high freight rates, be it on sea transport or air transport, the lack of availability of containers as well, and I go back to one of the comments that was said earlier in the previous session. Has anybody imported a container into Vietnam? Well, have you imported an LCL into Vietnam, which is normally a container that is shared between two or three different customers? It is extremely complex as it was before COVID. We should have used COVID as a great chance to reform the admin customs procedures of goods coming in, just like Thailand and Indonesia are doing. Thank you.
Great answer. Thank you very much, Alex. So, Peter, your business was established in 2017 and currently supplies a large proportion of the local pharmaceutical shops across the country. So during the pandemic, how much did you experience delayed shipments and products being held up in ports and customs across borders? And do you have any difficulties between balancing stock between your fulfillment centers?
Thank you, John. So for those of you who don't know, Tuxi.vn, we are a B2B platform for healthcare and pharmaceutical products. We supply to pharmacies, clinics, hospitals all over Vietnam. And so during COVID, we saw significant disruptions to the domestic and international supply chains. And domestically, when we talk and when we look at our suppliers, which are manufacturers, distributors, and wholesalers, at the time, all you needed was one, F0, one F1, even F2, then the entire company will shut down. So our suppliers, manufacturers, distributors who are supplying very critical medicine to all of Vietnam, there were significant disruptions there. Luckily for us, we're more tech-enabled, and we have fulfillment and logistics hubs all over the country. So we're set up in a much more agile way to respond to the COVID crisis, especially when you compare us with more traditionally operated manufacturers and distributors and wholesalers. Internationally, we over the past couple months, especially when China is having their significant breakout cases, then there's also significant disruptions more upstream. So now you're seeing raw ingredients from China being disrupted, and so therefore there's not a whole lot of APIs available for the domestic manufacturers to manufacture medicine. which is really a significant shame because Vietnam has, one of their goals is to rely more on local manufacturing of generic medicine, and without APIs you can't really make that shift. So again, reiterate the point where it's a missed opportunity, I believe, for Vietnam. However, there's still a lot more opportunities to capture in the future. And in terms of shifting demand between facilities within Vietnam, yeah, we've done that at Thuc Si. So when Ho Chi Minh City went into lockdown, almost overnight, our entire team shifted all fulfillment up to Hanoi. It was quite a really big achievement because you don't see a lot of companies our size being able to shift that much demand from Ho Chi Minh City to Hanoi. But our team really pulled through and we were able to shift supply all the way up to Hanoi.
Sao giờ còn một mic vậy chứ?
Actually, Peter, I want to come back to you again. So a question for more on the operational side. So how important is it for your business to be in close proximity to end practitioners? And what kind of fulfillment strategy are you working on to support that?
Well, what we've seen on the B2B side is that it's becoming a lot more important. Primarily because of the B2C. So, even doctors, pharmacists, they're becoming more used to faster delivery because they use Shopee, Tiki, and so forth. And so now they're becoming more and more demanding on the B2B side. So whereas, maybe 2-3 years ago, we can do, 5-day delivery, they're increasingly demanding 1-day, 2-day delivery. And so we've had to continually optimize our fulfillment strategies. And so, before we were using a central fulfillment center in Ho Chi Minh City and one in Hanoi. Now we're looking at a lot more hub and spoke models, having one main fulfillment center for the region, South Vietnam, for example, and then having multiple fulfillment centers closer to our customer base. And then each smaller logistics and fulfillment hub will then carry stock and inventory that is more relevant for that area. And so it's become a lot more flexible, it's become a lot more agile. It's using a lot more micro fulfillment centers across Ho Chi Minh City as well as South Vietnam.
Thank you very much, Peter. Very good answer. I'm going to move to Nelson. Okay. First of all, the pandemic has dramatically changed the way people live and work. And as Lance from BW mentioned in his presentation, it's even served as an accelerant to the e-commerce industry or the rise of e-commerce. So from your perspective, as a key partner of 4 of the biggest e-commerce platforms in Vietnam, what kind of opportunities did the pandemic bring to e-commerce industry in general, and more specifically for yourself and for Best Incorporated?
Okay. Firstly, I have to say I have slightly disagreement with Peter because what Peter observed during the pandemic is that there are a shift of from Shopee platform, Lazada, Tiki, etc., to B2B. But the things that once the pandemic actually has been much improved, the situation has turned around again. So one of the change we observe is that there's a shift in consumer habits. During the pandemic, due to the social distancing and due to the lockdown of the shopping malls, and also the supermarkets, a lot of consumers, they have to shift, from shopping offline to shopping online to meet the daily need. So, but now everybody knows that the COVID situation has been much improved and most of the restrictions has been relaxed or even removed. But we observed that a large number of consumers, they stay, continue to stay to shop online. So that actually drives up the demand of online commerce and also the transactions, which drives the demand for logistics and also especially the e-commerce last mile deliveries. And the second thing we observe is that this pandemic actually accelerated the growth of e-commerce industry overall. You see, when the demand, consumer habits actually change, so more and more enterprise brands, sellers, they also notice, that change, and they start to look into their online sales channel development, is start to look into the online strategy, which brings up the both on the supply side, which is the brands, merchandise, okay, enterprises, sellers, and also the demand side, which is the buyers and consumers. So these actually form a positive vicious cycle in the drive the industry upwards. And we all know that as of today, Vietnam's e-commerce is only accounts for a single digit of the total retail, which means there is a tremendous room to grow in coming years. That actually attracts both domestic and international players to join this investment into Vietnam. Now, we already have a platform like Shopee, Lazada, Tiki, Sendo, but we also see players like Shein, TikTok are joining the game. We also see BW are ramping up their investment in Vietnam. There are also new players like JD, China, and also SLP are investing into Vietnam. So all those investments are actually boosting up the development of e-commerce ecosystem in Vietnam, which is a good thing for everyone. And logistic, especially the e-commerce express delivery, it is the integral part to put all the buyers, sellers, a platform all together, which will enjoy this upward trend together with all other players and also partners. The third thing is that the acceptance of the e-payment. So Vietnam has been one of the countries with the highest cash on COD, cash on delivery ratio, which is about 90%. So what is the problem with cash on delivery? First of all, for the riders who deliver the parcels, the delivery on the COD item is much more complex than the non-COD item, which means that the productivity is much lower. Of course, the second issue is the amount of cash circulating in the network. You just imagine if you have 1 million parcels a day, and per parcel value is $10 or $20 USD, which means you have 10 million or 20 million US dollar cash circulating in the network every day. Exchange between the buyers, sellers, and also bank. I don't know how you feel, but as a service provider, I have many sleepless nights, worry about the mishandling of the COD money. So all those things, which means, of course, the third part is that with COD and the tendency of the consumer to return the goods or reject the goods are much higher, which makes Vietnam one of the countries with the highest return rate, for the e-commerce industry as compared to other countries in Southeast Asia. So all those things, which means inefficiency. But during the pandemic, the one thing we observe is that maybe partly due to the regulation requirement on the social distancing and also contactless delivery. So more consumers are adopting this cashless payment, which is the e-payment as the payment method. And same thing happens for the e-commerce, which is the demand and supply side. So when we see the demand on the the consumer side, the habit of accepting the e-payment are rising. And on the other hand, on the supply side, we have seen the recent investment into e-payment industry, like the recent fundraising from Vipf and Momo, etc. So we foresee this e-payment industry will continue to grow and mature in coming years. But why does it matter? Because e-payment is actually the financial infrastructure of e-commerce industry. So this development or fast forward development of e-payment industry will actually accelerate the growth of the e-commerce industry overall. Which will everyone including us and also BW and the rest of the investor will get benefit from that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. That's a very detailed answer, and certainly no signs of e-commerce slowing down anytime soon, especially with regards to the demand for last mile delivery from the real estate perspective. A lot of challenges and opportunities come out of that. So the market will definitely have to adapt, especially the property market, to keep up with that. Speaking of the property market, I'm going to have more of a industrial real estate question here from Michael Chan from BW. So what kind of change, Michael, have you witnessed before, during and after the pandemic with relation to manufacturing and warehouses? And also, what sort of tenant mixes are BW seeing these days? Thank you, Peter.
Okay.
Maybe I answer your first part of the question first. Like, what is the what pandemic changes like the landscape of like manufacturing demand overall? I would say like pretty much like a lot of like manufacturers, they have to think like just in case they have to deal with a lot of uncertainties. Maybe I mean like next year or somewhat like there will be a new variant of like COVID-19. We don't know. There may be oil price may soar up to like $150 a barrel. There may be like power shortage or power cut or power supply limitation happen in China again. There may be situations like, for instance, Xiaomi in India, they have like millions, hundred millions of dollars got frozen because of like the tax authority investigation. So a lot of manufacturers nowadays, they have to deal with like all these uncertainties, and the best way to do with it is like to have like a plan B or a contingency plan. And Vietnam is always like chosen to be the plan B or to be the alternative like investment location because of like various factors that our speakers did mention already, which is like including like the favorable locations and then like very stable government and currency, which give the investors and manufacturers a lot of confidence. So that's why we see a lot of like big players, they continue coming to Vietnam and choose Vietnam rather than other ASEAN countries like to be the investment locations. And then, of course, I mean, like they want to make money as well and capture new potentials. So with all these like new trade agreements like EVFTA, I'm sure like Sahos have like quite a lot of like tenants like from the Europe as well. I mean, they start looking into Vietnam market and then capture all these like new opportunities. So the demand of like from the manufacturers have definitely has gone up after the pandemic. We have seen like our inquiries for all these like I mean ready-built factory has gone up like a lot like after the reopening, actually twice compared to last year same time. So the recovery sign has been positive, and then a lot of them actually come to Vietnam. They want as a part of the big giants, big FMCG, big electronics players. They're trying to like localize their supply chain. So I mean, like shipping from China is to here or from other parts of the world is like getting difficult. So localization of like the supply chain has to be the long-term way to go. For the second part of the question, like how the pandemic reshaped the demand for warehouse, for sure, I mean like manufacturers and retailers, they want to keep more inventory, to have more buffer. It's buffer for stock, like the materials for production, as well as like buffer for stock for like selling for retails. So they increase their like safety stock, and then all these like drive the demand for warehouse, not just like in the port area, but also in the manufacturing zone. So that's why we BW also have like a couple of projects in those locations to cater for that demand. So and then your last question, I mean the tenant mix. We actually see like electronics continue to be the major powerhouse of like FDI on the manufacturing side. So we can see like electronics, they prefer like I mean they're localizing their like supply chain here, and then and then like the e-commerce in terms of like taking more space in the like greater Hanoi and greater Ho Chi Minh City area is going to continue to be the trend.
Great, thank you very much, Michael. Yeah, from the agency side, I mean, I agree with pretty much everything you said. I mean, our inquiries as well seem to be increasing since March, especially with the borders reopening, and compared with the last 5 years of our department in industrial services, we have had more European inquiries from occupiers this year than any other year, whether that's directly related to the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement or whatnot. It's positive to see. So hopefully by the end of this year, we also see that same increase from Chinese and Taiwanese Hong Kong occupiers as well once things improve over there. You mentioned at the beginning, you did mention just in case, and that actually brings me to my next question, which is for Alex. Alex, I mean, firstly, what's your opinion on just in case, and are you practicing either 9 or 12-month inventory buffer, and do you see a need to shift in your current supply chain to improve resistance to disruption?
So I'd say Vietnam's always been an assembly market. So people in terms of tier 1, tier 2 suppliers have always had to import components from China or Europe or elsewhere. So there's always been this sense that you need to have inventory on hand to process orders. So I'll start by making that statement, which means that already Vietnam was quite resilient to start with. However, just in time is something that kind of started to gain traction in Vietnam, and we all know the reasons why. You have less working capital tied up in inventory, you're not having to spend a lot of money on warehousing, etc., etc. So, yeah, the pandemic put an end to that. I think everybody wanted warehouses full of inventory so that they could keep their operations running. So we in Echo, we've been fine. We always have 3 to 6 months anyway on hand, so we were able to sail through the COVID, not perfectly, but fairly well. But for other companies, regardless of which sector they're in, I think we really need to think about what it means to be just in case. It means a lot more money in inventory, and at a time of rising commodity prices and potentially rising interest rates, I think just in case is a luxury. I think a lot of companies, unfortunately, will only be able to handle just in time.
I see. Okay. Well, actually, I think I'm going to go back to the real estate, but actually this time is for Nelson. So I'm going to talk a bit about build-to-suit first and automated warehouse. But I mean, 3-4 years ago there wasn't that many build-to-suits in Vietnam, and one of the first high-profile BTS projects I heard about was Best with the Tan Phu Chung warehouse built by BW. So the question is, please can you share some special storage, design or automation solutions that can help optimize your business efficiency with regards to tailored specifications and build-to-suit?
Sure. Just before the sharing, I just realized I'm sitting at the opposite side of the traditional supply chain, which you guys are talking about the safety stock. We are talking about how to eliminate the safety stock and going straight to the consumers and then cut away all the middle layers. So sorry for that. So anyway, so 4 years ago I first came to Vietnam. So what I realized is not there is no supply of the BTS, but I actually personally I surveyed more than 50 sites hunting for the suitable warehouse for my sortation center in Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi. And I found none, not even the 4-sided, not even the 2-sided. Most of the warehouses are still the traditional, one-sided kind of traditional logistic warehouse. So okay, I say fine. If there's no warehouse available, maybe I can talk to some of the developers. They can actually tell them what's my requirement, and maybe they can develop for me. And to my surprise, the answer is no. So I was puzzled. I asked the developers why. I mean, I pay you the money, and then you help me to design. They say, okay, it's very funny, your design is very funny, because in the market there's only one company asking for that design. If I build that warehouse for you, and then if you don't want that warehouse anymore, who am I going to lease the warehouse to? Right. So that was the situation I faced 4 years ago. So but luckily I met BW Lands, So and like Bruno mentioned from the deep sea, their experience, which is whichever developer you talk to other than BW, they will add up, at least 1 year to the development time, which is true. Okay, so I wouldn't mention the name, but there's another developer. Actually, I look for the warehouse, before I talk to BW. But then, after my warehouse in Ho Chi Minh is probably just about 10 or 11 months kind of development, and then after half a year. And then my second warehouse, which I engaged earlier, the BW was, then ready. So anyway, And and like Lance mentioned, that this bump into Tanfujun Industrial Park was really a coincidence, because we were actually working together to look for different locations, which is might be suitable for the South Asian Center. Eventually, we identified this Tanfujun, and as of today, we all know that Tanfujun has become the e-commerce hub. So. And today, I'm very happy to see that more and more players in the market, not just us, but also, like, Zahanyang, like JNT, and also Lex, Shopee Express, and also some other brands and companies are looking to invest into their own e-commerce sortation center with, investing all the kind of automation, etc., which to me is very, very important, because go back to the first sharing that, this ecosystem cannot be built just by one player alone, but it needs participation and investment from everyone. Taking into consideration the e-commerce is only about 4 to 7% of the total retail. So there's a much bigger room for everyone. So I really hope there will be more investment coming in, and then more people helping the e-commerce industry to develop and grow. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great answer, Nelson. I reckon some of those developers are kicking themselves that didn't agree to do a build-to-suit for you back then, considering how popular it's becoming now. But yeah, hopefully we get to see more of those tailored facilities from BW and some other developers as well, as opposed to just the ready builds and the land leases. Michael, I'm going to go back to you. Just a question about e-commerce. It still remains a catalyst for logistics demand. So from the warehouse developer perspective, how would you compare your e-commerce demand for warehouses? Firstly, 2021 compared with 2020, and what's your forecast for 2022?
So the demand definitely from e-commerce induced by ecosystem has been increasing. Not just like the platform players, but also like the last mile delivery companies. I mean, they have been very, very active. In 2020, we are fortunate to have like Best Logistics as one of our first build-to-suit project tenant, and then we have the another like e-commerce platform as well. And then up to now, we have been growing in Tanfujung area, and actually we have been receiving more requests and more tenants from the e-commerce player as well as the last mile companies. So Tanfujung essentially now becomes a hub for all these like e-commerce players and also last mile players. So actually, like, we want to duplicate, we want to replicate this like into other regions. For instance, because Ho Chi Minh City area is like very, in terms of like finding land is like very, very challenging. So we are looking into like other provinces like in Long An, in the south, or even like we are going to like Mekong River, the Delta area, so to serve the big population and big opportunities right there. In the north, we're definitely looking for like more, other provinces like Bat Ninh and Hung Yên, this kind of areas as well. So e-commerce driven or induced demand is definitely very, very strong. And I see that like the competition among the like e-commerce player or platform as well as the last mile guys are getting more intense. For them to stand out, for them to differentiate from each other is like very important in order to get a even bigger market share. Because right now, may be a little bit segmented in terms of like the last mile delivery. So the consumers are trying to get more sophisticated service. They used to be very happy with like maybe 5 days delivery, 4 days delivery. Sooner or later, they will be asking for more of speedier, like that kind of like delivery service, like down to like hours or like 1 day. They used to be maybe like order like shoes, apparels, all these like products online, and soon there may be platforms like us. Trying to cater for all these like perishables, fresh produce, that kind of like products. So I believe that the e-commerce this sector, they need to have like modern warehouses to support all their fulfillments and also their deliveries, meaning that they need to have like a good infrastructure, in addition probably their internal IT and sorting system. And then good network of warehouses covering the entire country will be the key for their success. So I believe like this is going to be the upcoming trend to extend into more strategic locations.
Yeah, fully agree. I mean, I think Lance also mentioned in his presentation, like Tam Fu Chung, initially a very industrial manufacturing area, now becoming an e-commerce hub, and now even Long An. I mean, 3 years ago, none of our clients would have considered distribution centres in Long An, but the last 2 years, so many new fantastic projects going there. So it just attributes to the rise of e-commerce in the last few years, and it doesn't show any signs that it's going to slow down. I'm going to move over to Alex again. I'm going to talk about one of the hot topics that many manufacturers in the world are talking about, and that is nearshoring. So just what do you think about this concept, and where currently does the bigger part of ECHO's end consumers currently locate?
So it's it is an interesting topic. I mean, firstly, the answer to your question is our customers are North America, Europe, Northeast Asia. But generally speaking, in those markets, it's not easy to find people who are willing to work in a shoe factory. Shoemaking is very, very labour intensive, and as a result, it tends to be in countries such as Indonesia, such as Thailand, and more recently in Vietnam. So I think onshoring or nearshoring is possible if you're very capital intensive, and for Europe, North Africa starts to look very attractive, Turkey to a degree, and I think if you're in the US, then Mexico has traditionally always been an area for that. So for us, we foresee the need to be in Southeast Asia for quite a bit longer, but Vietnam needs to watch out because there are some big factories that are being established in very, very developed markets where capital-intensive production methods are used. I mean, Tesla recently opened a factory in Berlin. In northern Sweden, you see the first green steel plant. And if you look at factories in the future, there's going to be a very large ESG component. And Vietnam has to think, what is its ESG capability in that regard? And I'm not just talking the area that the plant is on, I'm talking around the plant. Are the rivers clean? Is there good social governance? And these are things that I think that as Vietnam comes up the value chain, they need to consider more and more. So there's still quite a bit of work to do to stem the offshoring process back to Europe and back to North America.
Thank you, Alex. Good answer. I was actually going to have just a quick follow-up question on that. Is there any case study from ECHO Group where you've moved the regional supply chain closer to end consumers, and how does it impact your operating system?
I'm very proud to say that I work for a company that has never closed a factory.
One of the very
So we have a factory that was built in Portugal in the late 70s and that is still operational to this day. So we've moved areas of it, so the labour-intensive parts, we may have moved to Asia, we may have invested and maintained the capital-intensive parts in Portugal, but we have a system that can move around. And it probably did not look very smart in the 90s and the early noughties. But now that wages in Asia over the last 20 years have increased a lot, it starts to look pretty good to have that level of flexibility. So we already did nearshore, is my answer.
Fantastic. Very good. And interesting to know that about ECHO. I never knew that. Great. So I'm going to move on to the last question, which actually I was going to ask Peter earlier, but I would like to ask Nelson, perhaps, if he's okay with that. So what extent do you see a trend of end users diversifying supply bases and distribution, distribution and transportation partners as a supply chain strategy post-COVID?
Oh, okay. So that's you know, if Peter is here, his answer will be very different from mine. so Peter probably will be talking about B2B, but I'm not saying that B2B will not be there. B2B is an integral part of the supply chain. It's just that if you look at China, the e-commerce now accounts for 28% of the total retail. In the market for Vietnam is only about 4 to 7%. The number varies, but and when we look at that data, actually it speaks itself, which is going forward, there will be more and more the B2C, or we call it B2B2C. All right, so B2B will always be there because apparently the goods will need to be produced by the factories, by the merchandise, but the distribution part, which traditionally we talk about modern trade, traditional trade, and then we talk about distributors setting up their distribution centers across the country. One brand like DuPont, we have 5,000 small, kind of distributors all over, in the country. So this is a very, if you talk about that number, I think it's large, but it's very common for all the, distributors. But now, if you think about, switching to the online channel, and then you will cut away all the middle layers, the kind of cost saving, as well as the lead time, and we talk about the supply chain. Actually, for all the supply chain optimization, it's all talking about how do you reduce the safety stock. I'm so sorry for the warehouse, supply chain, operator, but going forward, that should be the way. That should be the way, be it domestic or being international players when they actually sell. We see cross-border sales on the rise, and in the past, probably four years ago, the volume, the cross-border e-commerce volume between Vietnam and China is probably, very small portion. But today we're talking about probably 200,000 parcels to 300,000 parcels a day, just on the cross-border channel. So I think everybody and all the enterprises, they should look into this, online strategy. So coming back to, what is the online strategy? What's the key difference between online and offline? So if you talk about the commerce transaction, buyer and seller, there's not much difference, in the past, don't know how many years, but actually e-commerce is really the way that you have to use technology to, change the way how we run our operation and run the business. So come back to the point, I'm not trying to hard sell e-commerce, etc. I mean, e-commerce is the trend. So the enterprises and companies, I hope more and more of them will actually look into the online strategy, look into the technology as their foundation, look into innovating the product and services, and then of course the logistics services is one key part of their fulfillment and delivery. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Nelson. Sorry for putting you on the spot, but great answer. That brings us to the end of our session on operating supply chains in the new market context. So special thanks, of course, to Alex, Michael and Nelson and Peter for their time and their great answers. Thank you all as well, and hope you enjoyed the rest of the day.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn